you for joining us tonight. A couple housekeeping items that I will repeat probably one more time for those who are joining us late. If you could enter any questions that you have in the Q&A, that will help us keep the chat clear for resources that we're going to be passing along. We will also be sending out the slide deck as well as a recording. So if there was an element that perhaps went too fast or you'd like to see a closer example, that will be in your inbox tomorrow. We're so excited to get started with you talking about project-based learning in a modern classroom. Our agenda tonight, we're going to start by taking a look at an introduction to the Modern Classrooms Project. If you're new to us, we'll briefly touch on our work as a nonprofit organization. Then we'll overview best practices for project-based learning and really kind of get into why PBL, what is project-based learning, and really some best practices when it comes to our planning prior to, of course, even starting a PBL unit. Then, of course, we're going to take a closer look at what project-based learning looks like in a modern classroom. So how do we utilize blended, self-paced, and mastery-based structures in a project-based unit or a project-based learning unit? And then I know we're going to have lots of questions. We have a true expert with us tonight. I'm really happy to be introducing her shortly. And so please, there will be time for your questions. And we're just going to take a look at the very end about further resources about how you can continue work with modern classrooms. If you're not familiar with the Modern Classrooms Project, we are a nonprofit organization who seeks to empower you, the educator, to build classrooms that respond to every student's need. We truly lead a movement of educators, and you can find us all over the world at this point. And we we're passionate about implementing self-paced, mastery-based instruction to really, again, meet students' needs, leverage technology to foster human connection, authentic learning, and social emotional growth. My name is Kate Gaskill. I am the Modern Classroom Project's Head of Teaching and Learning and proud former high school social studies teacher. And I am so happy to be joined tonight by Kristen Moore. Kristen, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Kate. Hi, everybody. My name is Kristen Moore, and I am a high school math teacher here in Brighton, Michigan. I'm also our school's STEM instructional coach, and this year I became a distinguished modern classroom educator, and I am a brand new modern classroom mentor.
Yeah, we'll pass along some information at the very end to learn a little bit more about becoming a distinguished modern classroom educator and possibly even a modern classroom mentor. But I'd like us first to focus on, I guess, what the modern classroom, what this blended, self-paced, mastery-based instructional model grew in response to. And I think regardless of where we teach, what we teach, the age of students we serve, there are problems with traditional teaching. And by that, I mean, when we teach the same thing to all of our learners on the same day. This certainly arose in my classroom and the classroom of our co-founders here at the Modern Classrooms Project. So there we were, one teacher in front of a diverse group of learners. We had our students who were there every single day. Our students, they were on grade level, even above grade level at times. And oftentimes the work was just too easy for those students. We struggled to keep them, sometimes even rigorously engaged in class because they'd sort of checked out a bit. And then we had our students who were out. We had our students who were absent. Oftentimes, for family reasons, health reasons, these were excused absences many times. But the more class they started to miss, the more it felt like they couldn't catch up, and then they'd become further disengaged in class. And then we had our students who, when we tested them in math, in reading, they did test below grade level. And despite our interventions, it felt that these students had difficulties keeping up. And that left us as the single teacher in the room feeling really discouraged. We got into education because we really care about kids. We wanted to serve students. And it became so frustrating when you really felt that I can't, I'm one person, and how do I meet all these needs in this classroom? And so we thought there has to be a better way. And that's really the instructional model that we came to implement in our classrooms. So our model, if you're not familiar with it, our research-based model implements blended instruction. So I like to say that, I've cloned myself by I, their teacher, create instructional videos where my students can pause, rewind me, and access content when it's appropriate for them. Blending my instruction or cloning myself on video, if you will, allows my classroom to then be self-paced. It also allows me to work one-on-one with learners, pull small groups, and a self-paced classroom, when our students will self-pace within a unit of study, a self-paced classroom can then be a mastery-based classroom where our students progress based on mastery, not compliance and completion, once they've demonstrated mastery on a previous skill or previous content. At the Modern Classrooms Project, we serve teachers in a variety of ways. It's our goal, really, to reshape the teacher experience. Again, we're starting with you, the educator. We want to empower you. We believe by focusing on teachers and I guess kind of passing on how we leverage technology in our classrooms, we can reshape the student experience and equip each educator to meet the unique needs of their students. And we do that through a few ways at the Modern Classrooms Project, and all those good links will be coming to you at the end. We do our free online course, learn.modernclassrooms.org. If you're not familiar, we also offer our virtual mentorship program, where you can work with expert teacher mentors like Kristen, who are implementing modern classroom style instruction in their classrooms. And then this summer, we have a new opportunity I'll talk about here in a minute with our virtual summer institute. And then we work in partnerships with schools and districts every day, empowering entire buildings of educators. Last thing before we get started tonight, if you haven't heard about our virtual summer institute, I would love to plug this just because I think it's going to be we're going to have a lot of fun. It's all the benefits of our virtual mentorship program and more, because summer just allows us a bit more flexibility. So it's the virtual mentorship program along with live presentations on blended instruction, self-paced structures, and mastery-based grading. And then further support with online office hours every day through Zoom, our private discussion board, and optional presentations. Everything ranging from subject-specific guidance to, let's see, trauma-informed teaching, supporting modern classrooms teachers, how instructional coaches can really be there for our teachers. We have a lot of really great events planned, and we're really excited about that. You can head to the website I put in the chat if that's something that interests you. But let's start talking about why we're here tonight. And that, of course, is to learn more about project-based learning in a modern classroom. And we need to start by overviewing really what project-based learning is and what it isn't. So what is project-based learning? Well, I'm a history teacher. I find it very interesting to see that project-based learning actually grew out of what was happening in med schools. And it's really a teaching method in which students gain knowledge and skills by working for an extended period of time to investigate and respond to an authentic, engaging, complex question, problem, or challenge. And I'm so happy that we have Kristen here tonight, who's actually going to walk us through just that. She's going to walk us through a unit where her students spent a significant amount of time investigating and responding to an authentic, engaging, and complex question. But why project-based learning? We know that there are several models of education. There's several teaching models that we can incorporate in our classrooms. And what I love about Modern Classrooms Project is we ground everything we do in research. So everything we do, we want to look to that research. And oftentimes I think academic research confirms what great teachers already know and are feeling in their classrooms. So first of all, this was a lit review that said that said project-based learning really can yield benefits ranging from student engagement, attendance, and achievement. This lit review covered all sorts of studies. We'll put the link in the chat here in a minute, that talked about how PBL can increase retention of content in the long term, can improve student problem solving skills, collaboration skills, and improve student attitudes towards learning. What I love about these studies that we're showing tonight, despite the fact that Kristen and I were high school teachers, is really PBL, project-based learning, has a lot of benefits for students of all ages, as we're going to get to, especially in this next study. So project-based learning has been shown to raise student achievement in low-income communities. This particular study done in 2017 looked, and it was in the American Midwest, and looked at second grade classrooms, 11 second grade classrooms in 11 lower socioeconomic status school districts. And the study found that with greater consistency, project-based learning was associated with higher growth in writing, reading, and student motivation in these social studies classrooms that the study explored. To continue on the age diversity beyond just high school, this next study was actually of middle schoolers. So this one looked at students obtaining more complex skills. This was a variety of classrooms. I believe, I have to go back and check for sure. This one, I believe, was across 12 classrooms. And what they did is they, of course, this involved multimedia, or there was a tech grant, what they looked at. And they said they wanted to study students who had exposure to multimedia or tech access in project-based learning in some classrooms, and then against the control group, of course, in other classrooms with traditional teaching methods. And when compared to their peers, the students with the multimedia access in the project-based learning classroom, they were able to work on more complex projects, or products rather, and increase their communication and design skills. And then finally, what I love about this one is it focuses on us, focuses on the teacher. Teachers believe in this approach. This particular study was actually of early elementary folks, and they found that essentially the teachers kept using it even beyond the study. So teachers studied, they remained so enthusiastic about project-based learning, saying it gave directions to their lesson plans, involved parents, and really helped them, just address students with hands-on learning, hands-on curriculum for a unique and in a variety of learners. But I think, Kristen, I really like, I'm putting these studies in the chat, or links to them rather, but I always like it when you talk about project-based learning as, as ordering dessert or having a dinner party. Will you tell us more about that?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so a question that we get often is, what is the difference between just doing a project and actual project-based learning? And so I love to compare it to the idea of just ordering dessert or hosting a dinner party. When you're ordering dessert, you are getting that delicious, tasty recipe. It's already been prepared and presented for you. It's the final product, right? And so projects are a lot like having dessert. They're done at the end of the learning to culminate the experience, the end of the learning, the end of the dinner. Whereas when you're hosting a dinner party, that requires a lot of planning, prep work, research into recipes, creating the dishes, cleaning up the dishes after the party, reflecting, sitting down, and being exhausted, right? Project-based learning is a lot more like having that dinner party. It is an ongoing process driven by a common goal or question that includes aspects of research, planning, constructing, and reflecting.
So when we talk about what project-based learning is and what it's not, I think it's really helpful to kind of, at least it was in my mind, to keep in mind that framework of dessert versus dinner party. So we're going to go through a list of things that are project-based learning versus things that are probably just a project. So project-based learning, if students are engaging in an in-depth investigation of a topic worth learning more about, that is a marker of project-based learning. When the class immerses themselves in this topic, again, we're talking about an extended period of time, project-based learning. Another marker, students meaningfully demonstrating acquisition of skills and content knowledge. And I love how, Kristen, you're going to get into this. And I learned so much when we were prepping for this. Another marker of project-based learning is the unit is built so students can transfer their learning to new kinds of situations. That is very important. We talk about a real-world context. So naturally, the next point, lessons and activities connect to real-world problem solving. These are all indicative of project-based learning. Now, let's take a look though, projects are great, dessert's great, but let's take a look at some markers where it's probably not project-based learning, and this is probably just more of a unit with a project. So when the unit is structured for kids to complete a separate end of unit project, it's not involved, it's not a process, that is more dessert, a project. When students consistently work independently, and we're going to be talking about collaborative opportunities, even if it's an independent final product or culminating as journey at the end, it's still, if they're independent the entire time, not a marker of project-based learning. We want to be highly collaborative. If the unit lacks a guiding question that centers the activities, we need to go back and take a look at that. And then finally, teachers and students, with the emphasis is on the final academic product, the project. We talk about with project-based learning, the emphasis is really on the learning, on the process.
Yeah.
So Kristen, will you walk us through, I guess, before you get into what a unit looks like in your modern classroom, talk us through like what the phases of project-based learning are.
Yeah, absolutely. So project-based learning units can range anywhere from, 3 weeks to 9 weeks. And so you really want to make sure that you are breaking those down into the phases so you know what to expect during each of those. So the first phase of any project is the launch phase. Then we're going to be moving into building knowledge where the students are really starting to understand the content and make those connections. We're going to develop that knowledge and critique our work. And then we're going to be presenting and reflecting. And that presentation is often like that final product moment. So what happens in each of these phases? So the launch, that's going to start our project. It's going to kick us off. This is where we're going to hook our students and pique their curiosity. We are going to introduce the essential question that is going to drive the learning for the entire project. Then what we need to do is we need to gather these need to know questions to help shape the lessons from the project. And it's really important here that we are capturing student voices, because the more students have voice in a project, the more that they're going to be bought into the project. And this is a critical and often overlooked component. It's so easy to be like, oh, I know what they need, but really you want to capture those student voices. Now, that being said, you do want to think about what those need to know questions are ahead of time, before you launch. This way, you can kind of help guide that conversation in case their questions are drifting too far from where your learning targets are intended to be. And you can make sure that they're asking and answering the questions that are connected to that content. This is also where you're going to start sparking interest and ideas with your students about the different kinds of final products they make. Often when you're doing a project in a classroom, you expect your students to complete one exact thing. But in project-based learning, you really don't know what the final product is going to be. You might have some ideas, but you want to make sure that your students are expressing their autonomy and they're invested in picking their final products themselves. All right. And then we work into building knowledge. And this is where the meat of the content is learned. This is a long part of the project process. This is where you have those lessons and activities that address those need to know questions that your students have generated. And creating these activities, you are doing that so that delivers the skill knowledge, but in a non-project specific way. That way you can use those resources for years to come. And the students are seeing that the content is transferable outside of just that individual project. Students also gather information that is not content specific, but is needed to address the essential question. I am a math teacher, but I frequently do projects in my project-based learning units that incorporate ideas from a variety of fields. And so I really rely on the other content area experts and other community members to help me help my students answer this question. Then once we've got all of this learning, our students have had a good chance to explore, they think they have an idea for how to answer this essential question. This is where we're going to like really develop that knowledge and critique where we're at. The students are going to be refining their skills and collaborating with one another to improve. So we mentioned this is not just an individual thing. We really want to make sure our students are collaborating and working together to make sure that they can answer these. Students are going to be demonstrating mastery of the materials at this point. They're going to be demonstrating mastery of the content knowledge that they have gained and the project skills that are going to be necessary. They're also going to be giving and receiving feedback from their peers. And we want to make sure that the students have good routines and expectations for this. Just like everyone else, we all thrive when we have routines and expectations. And so giving them a framework to give feedback to their peers is really essential in helping them build their confidence in doing so. Our favorite way is the warm and cool feedback stems. We use these in every meeting we ever have and in every project we have. I like this because of this. Or I wonder if you change something in this way. So you're trying to give your students an opportunity to state what's going well for the other student and to also try to push their learning in a polite and constructive manner. And then we get to the culminating event. We are presenting and we are reflecting on our work. They are going to be so excited to show off what they've learned. And then they're going to engage in a reflection, sometimes individual, sometimes group, after this culminating activity. So this is their final chance to demonstrate mastery of what they've been learning. And what's great about this is that they're presenting their final products and you're not just looking at a poster board to see what they know. The students get to elaborate on the process that went into creating whatever it is that their deliverable is. They also get a chance to talk with you and whoever else is at this culminating event to describe the learning that went on behind the scenes. And this is a really great way to be able to assess more holistically what your students' mastery of that knowledge is. Students are then going to reflect on their learnings and respond to that essential question one more time. We've been engaged in this whole unit for 3, 4, 9 weeks. We want to make sure that they have a very strong, confident answer to that essential question. So they're going to be self-assessing both their mastery of the content and their understanding of that essential question. We're going to identify which 21st century skills that they applied. And my favorite is that they're going to be defining goals for themselves for the next project. This gives your students an opportunity to think about what went well and what opportunities they have to improve. And those opportunities, something that didn't work out as well as they would have liked, that's where they're going to be setting a goal for growth in the next project-based learning unit that you do. All right. So we have some best practices in project-based learning, and these come to us from PBL Works, and they are who I've always been working with in all of my project-based training. They are the leaders in this design. So project design, when designing projects, you have to start with the learning goals. If you look at this image here, you see learning goals are at the center here. We are always focusing on making sure that our students are getting those key knowledge, understanding, and success skills. So it's not just content. You want to think about how they're processing it and also those success skills, those 21st century skills, how we're preparing them for the future. We want to start slow and build our way up to achieving the gold standard. There are 7 essential project design elements here, and I don't even knock them all out of the park with every project, and I've been doing this for 10 years. You really want to give yourself grace when you are doing project-based learning. And remember that designing projects is project-based learning in and of itself, and you are going to get better each and every time you draft that new project. Now, because we're delivering the content in a different way, you also want to be thinking about the best practices for teaching in that project-based unit. You really want to make sure that you're focusing on building this culture of revision and acceptance of failure. I know so many of us are familiar with the growth mindset, right? And so this is an opportunity for our students. They're going to struggle, they're going to encounter obstacles and failure, and you want to make sure that you've established that safe place in your classroom where they know that they're going to fail. It's going to be okay, and they're going to revise and keep working to be able to master that task. Setback is key to helping your students grow in perseverance and in grit as they learn through the project process. And by the time you do your first project of the year to your last project of the year, you are just going to see so much growth with your students if they've come to accept this culture. Again, you'll notice in this diagram, the learning goals, they are still at the heart of all you are doing. All of the practices that you are implementing in your classroom, your goal is to help those students master those knowledge, understanding, and success skills so that they can transfer this outside of the project. Here, when we break our project phases into milestones, which we'll be talking about pretty soon, when you do that during the project design, this is where you're going to be able to select appropriate activities to help you scaffold the learning for your students.
So I love right now to kind of just raise the fact that you said that, Kristen, you've been doing project-based learning for 10 years or
Yeah.
more. And it's what I love about that is you really had experience and time to become, just hone these skills on, to design your project-based learning units. And then modern classrooms sort of came into the picture. So I'm actually going to put a link in the chat right now of a recent article that Kristen wrote about essentially taking the great project-based learning work she was doing and then adapting the modern classroom approach to blended self-paced mastery-based learning. So I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit about what this really looks like realistically in a modern classroom. How do we marry these two? We're always proud at modern classrooms because we say, like, we get along, so to speak. We can be in IB classrooms, we can be in AP classrooms, we can be in Montessori classrooms, we can really do a lot of this. So it wasn't surprising to us to see you have such success with project-based learning. But I think educators are looking for a little bit more support and some examples on what it looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I was so excited to find the Modern Classrooms project over the summer. And when I found your model, I knew that this is how I was going to be able to continue with project based learning, especially in that virtual distance, weird space that a lot of us were in at the end of the spring and when I was preparing for the fall. And the more I got into it and went through the program, I was like, this is going to work for me even better when I'm in person. So I'm so excited to show all of you guys how project-based learning works in my modern classroom. So, how do we combine these best practices? Well, you heard me mention just a minute ago that we need to break down our projects into manageable chunks, which I call milestones. And each of those is going to be driven by their own guiding question. So, these kind of help support all of us in reaching that big essential question. And when we do that, when we break it into milestones and we have a question to help push us during each of those milestones, that's where we're going to be able to seamlessly fuse the modern classroom practices and incorporate the blended instruction, some of that self-pacing structure, and the mastery-based grading. So this is a little peek into my classroom. Like I mentioned, I teach at a project-based high school. We are a public charter in Brighton, Michigan. I was one of the first 5 original founding teachers here. And since then, I've helped open 2 more campuses. So I know that this works, you guys. The project that I'm going to walk you through is one that I've designed for my Math 1 students. This class was frequently late to class. These students, it is the first class right after lunch. And so I had to pique their interest. I have to keep it real and keep it relevant. That's how we're building the authenticity into a project. And so we're doing a project together called What's for Lunch, where we're going to figure out how to optimize their time and their money so they can get back to my class on time. So here you'll see that this comes from my project planner that I developed for every one of my projects. I have the stages or phases broken down here. And what I really like about this visual is it shows you how there's overlap in the stages and phases that you're in. So that you're going to be launching, and right in the launch, you're starting to build that knowledge. You're starting to pre-assess and see where your students are at. While you're building knowledge, you're going to start mastering it, and it's going to kind of snowball effect. So you're in the develop and critique phase at the same time. Present and reflect, those are the 2 quickest parts. Like the presentation is one day, right? It's usually a really epic and exciting day. And then the reflection is always really fun the day afterwards, when you can all just sit back, relax, reflect on your own learning, and reflect on how we did with the project as a whole, as a group. So you'll see here, I've broken down my phases then into these milestones, and I happen to have 7. You could have any number of them. It really just depends on what your project is, how long your project is going to be. In a typical school year, I would think that this project would take me about 6 weeks. In a Corona school year where I'm teaching these students only twice a week, it's probably going to take us more like 9, but I'm covering 3 big math units in this. So I feel pretty good about that. So in this, I track the progress with my deliverable, right? We're always working towards building something at the end. Every time they complete a milestone, they've got a little piece of that final product, a little piece to bring with them to that final presentation. And you also want to think about what are those key student questions that the students are going to have about your content and your deliverable. So you want to be thinking kind of in dual brains right there. And that's going to help guide what you do in each of these. So I'm going to look at milestone 3. This is how I plan what happens in the milestone. And you'll see here, I said it's about 2 to 3 weeks. This is where my students are learning all about linear equations and linear functions. So milestone 3 is driven by the question, what's the cost? We need to figure out how much it's going to cost for lunch, right? And so I have my goal. Students will write linear equations to represent the cost of various lunches. We've already done a survey. I know where all of the students want to eat. And now we have to figure out how much does it actually cost for the average student to eat there. In that milestone, I've listed my major instructional activities. And so some of these are activities that I do with the whole class. Domino Effect from Mathalicious is a great sparking project piece where students are figuring out what the cost per topping is and then what the cost of a plain cheese pizza is, and that gets them to start thinking about rate of change and what is a y-intercept or an initial value. And so they're starting to ask these questions, which feeds then seamlessly into my my modern classroom lessons here on linear equations and linear functions. So this whole milestone would be open to my students at a time, and they see what we're going to be doing together and then what lessons they have to flexibly work throughout that milestone. They're going to be determining the cost. And then each of these ends with a milestone marker, is what I like to call them. My colleagues make fun of me for that. They're like, just call it a formative assessment. But milestone marker sounds so much better, right? So this is where I'm doing the major mastery check for that milestone to really make sure that they've mastered all that is linear equations and linear functions. But up here in each one of my modern classroom lessons, I've already been checking that along the way. So this is just their one big time to put it together before they move further in the project. Best practices always have us reflecting at constant times throughout the project. So I've noted some prompts for reflection during the milestone. And I've also put in which need to know questions the students have asked or that I've anticipated the students are going to ask. So like, what if they charge a delivery fee because our students couldn't go into the restaurant, so they had to get it delivered to them? Will the price ever not be linear? Like, that's a great question and exploration, and I want to encourage that. So the keys really for me with designing my modern classroom lessons, though, is to make sure that those are project neutral. So those same lessons that I showed here, these linear equations and linear functions one, I've already used in a different project with a completely different class. And that's because I've made them project neutral. So this is my lesson 1, understanding slope and rate of change. You see, I give some objectives, my criteria for mastery. My lesson and my resources are going to go there. I've classified my lessons according to modern classroom practices. So I have my must do's, my should do, my aspire to do. I've got some guided notes here, and you can see like this video. I'll show you a
Today we're
smidge.
going to talk about how to understand slope as a rate of change. Let's go ahead and get started. Things that you're going to learn today, you're going to learn how to analyze a table and a graph to calculate slope. We're also going to be able to identify slope here in an equation or an inequality. Some words and concepts you need to know. Rate of change is the value at which something is changing. A constant rate
Super
of change
basic,
happens.
guys. Like,
You would
I'm
take
going
m as
through a little bit
equal
of
to the
the
change in y
notes,
over the
some of the key
change in
vocab
x.
that the students are going to need. I give them some
3,
examples. They're totally project neutral. These are things that the students are going to need to know transferable outside of this project. And so that's what keeps this super sustainable. Oh, I don't want
today
you to
we're
play again. Okay, so when you're in project-based learning, it is a little bit of organized or controlled chaos. And so there's a couple of different ways that people like to organize this. And we actually are just piloting this new learner management system. So I'm going to show you how we have it on this new one, which if you use Trello at all, this should look a lot like a Trello board, which Trello is great. So we start here. This is our task board overview, and our students can log in and they see this exact same thing too. So you'll see my milestones 1 and 2 I grouped together. Those were both part of my launch phase. I establish what my goal is, and then I start linking in the different items that the students are going to need. Right. So we watched Super Size Me. We got curious about why teenagers were drawn to fast food. We had a discussion about it. We created a survey, etc. Milestone 3 that I just showed you guys, here is where we do this activity together. Anything in pink, we're doing together. And then if it's not in pink, it's something that they can completely self-pace themselves with. So these are where I house my modern classroom lessons. They're like, okay, now I know how it works with pizza. Like, how do I really know how much something is changing each time? So they're going to deep dive into the content, right? We bring it back together. Now we're going to be writing systems of equations. And so this is figuring out how they can maximize their time and minimize their money to get there. Optimization is my favorite. So you can see we've got this. And like we said, the build knowledge is the meat of the learning. 3 and 4, you can't even see how far they go. That's the heart of the learning. 5 is the solution and 6 is our presentation. Like those are much quicker aspects. We also have been using Google Classroom as our learner management system. And that's actually what we've been using up until like 2 months ago when we started the other one. And so this is how it would look like in my Google Classroom. I grabbed milestone 1 because my kids aren't at milestone 3 yet. And because we do 9-week projects, I don't put everything out there for them. We go milestones at a time, maybe 2 at a time, depending on how long they are. So here's what's for lunch. Again, there's that Super Size Me, those what questions do you have? And then the 2 items that you couldn't see on the task board. Types of studies was an activity we did together. And then here we have a green check mark, which is my emoji-based system for this is a must do for you. So they had to figure out the questions to ask students for our survey.
So I'd love to get into some of the frequently asked questions we get before we get to specific ones that our educators in the audience are asking tonight. So we frequently get asked about the use of instructional videos in a project-based learning unit. Can you tell us what, our first question is, what are the various ways that you use instructional videos specifically in a project-based learning unit?
Yeah. So in addition to just teaching the content, right? Like you saw, I gave you examples of videos for content specific linear equations. What is the slope? What is the rate of change? But another really great way to use the instructional videos in a project-based classroom is to teach the different tools and protocols that you're going to use, because each student is going to be designing their own final product. And so they might need the makerspace. They might need the 3D printer. They might need just some prototyping tools. I might need to know that they know how to safely use an X-Acto or, one of those tools that we keep in our room, but we want to make sure our students are safe with. And so I can use these instructional videos where they have to go through, they listen to that video, they watch it, they take their notes, they do what they need to, they complete a mastery check to show me they can safely do those things. And then I can feel confident sending them down to go work on anything in the makerspace.
Mhm. I really like that. And we talk about the different uses for instructional videos all the time. We're not always just explaining a new concept or demonstrating a new skill. It can be, breaking down a complex text or, referencing materials in the classroom, really or a how-to with tech. The next question that we get frequently is about self-pacing. Are there any unique considerations for self-pacing in a project-based learning unit?
Yeah, so that was the part that I was nervous about. But I've really found that because I'm breaking these into milestones, you're going to be okay. What is so important is making sure that everyone is ready for that culminating event. And because it's 4, 6, 9 weeks away, it can be hard for our learners to manage themselves for that amount of time. So what I do is I have those hard deadlines at each milestone. So this milestone is ending next Friday, right? but the students have flexibility to self-pace through the assignments, activities, lessons, whatever they need to between now and next Friday, as long as on that Friday, we're all submitting our milestone.
Mhm. And we talk about that even in our not project-based learning units in a modern classroom. A self-paced, of course, students do well with those guardrails. Um,
Yes.
Oftentimes we do take a unit and we say, we're going to break this down into smaller chunks. So it's interesting to see that you did that with the milestones. Let's go on to just questions that our educators have for us tonight. One question that we received actually had to do. This was from Megan, who teaches fifth grade math teacher, and
Awesome.
she asked about finding. We talk about the authentic audience for PBL and that demonstration of learning. Any suggestions? How have you done this at your school? How have you found authentic audiences for that final aspect of the unit?
Yeah. So community connections can really be kind of the sticking point for a lot of teachers. They don't know who to go to or where to go. And so what we start at the beginning of every school year, we send a survey out to all of our parents, just kind of to get feelers out there, like, who are you? What do you do? Could we maybe use you as a connection? But we also go to like our board of education. We have them put some feelers out. We connect with our like chamber of commerce and we talk to them, and it gets a lot easier as time goes on. And surprisingly, we've actually found it's easier to make community connections this year because people are so happy to just zoom in and be that expert. We had, oh gosh, an environmental scientist for like the federal government zoom into our classroom and talk to a bunch of squirrely ninth graders about how waste is impacting the environment. And it was perfect. I would never have had him come to my class. I wouldn't have known how to get him here. But because we can use Zoom, it's really great to be able to make those connections.
Yeah, it's kind of an upside of all of this,
Yeah,
of hybrid and remote learning.
silver lining.
All a little more comfortable on Zoom. So a few other questions that are coming in is, Helene was wondering about, so she says that, when she tried to do a semester long project-based learning as current investigators with students who were 7th and 8th grade.
Okay.
So it was hard to maintain interest, even though the students had chose the social issue. And she really wanted the students in each class to have a different topic. And she was overwhelmed trying to find articles and research on multiple issues. So would there be any advice on managing this?
Yeah. So especially when you are starting out, you want to kind of limit the scope, right? We talked about how project-based learning is an ongoing process. It is project-based learning in and of itself. And so it's awesome to have them pick their own topics, but if you have a little bit of control over that, you can do some of that work behind the scenes before you launch that project for your students. So what we frequently use is some form of choice board where we've got 5 or 6 ideas that our students can investigate. And then there's always that, or pitch an idea of your own. And so we've got some resources on the back burner to help those 5 or 6 areas. And for that one off, like that's just a great conversation to have with a student.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I really like that. And then some clarification a little bit on collaboration and collaboration's role in a project-based learning unit. So my understanding from project-based learning is that students can absolutely, there will be activities that are independent, and there might even be, a culminating task that's independent. But we do want our students giving feedback to each other. That seems to be an integral part of project-based learning. Do I have that correct? Like that giving and receiving feedback from peers really needs to be a part of a project-based unit, or project-based learning unit.
Yeah, right. It's a mouthful when you say it.
Really is, yeah.
It is. Yeah, no, collaboration is key, right? Everyone learns more when you're able to bounce your ideas off of somebody else. So whether you're giving them that choice board and they've got those 5 ideas, then, whoever chose idea 3, all of those people have somebody who's equally doing that same research. But in general, you could have one from each of those categories, or everyone has their own topic, but they all have to engage in that same process. And they're all working on those same essential questions. So they can be sitting there and collaborating like, this is how I'm researching and what I'm finding. What are you finding on your topic? And then at each milestone, that's a great opportunity to have those students like get together, share what they've learned, share that presentable, that's a word,
Cool.
deliverable, what they're about to
It's a
present.
Tuesday in March. It's a word. Like teachers are tired right now.
Yeah, yeah, presentable is a word. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's so many opportunities, whether they're, working all towards the same thing or working on different areas, just finding those opportunities for the students to work next to each other and just share those ideas.
Mhm. It's so funny because Helene said the same thing in the question and answer, but also to me, I hadn't thought of the choice board kind of, I'd done it for other things, but I had done it more sort of like for like aspire to do tasks in my modern classroom, but I hadn't thought of structuring a project like that. And so Helene and I say thank you. One quick question Jamie had is, what was the new LMS? Was that Trello that you were showing us?
So it looks a lot like Trello. The name of that LMS is called Head Rush.
Okay. Head Rush.
Head Rush, yeah.
And what do you think of it?
I've been enjoying it so far. I've actually been in quarantine with my youngest son for the 2 weeks since we've launched it with that group that you saw in my picture. But feedback from my colleagues is that it's working pretty well for them. And I am in quite a few different project-based learning communities, and they have good reviews of it there also.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We don't have any other questions in the chat at this point, but please, we're going to be here for a little while longer. I'm going to overview just a few more resources before we leave. But if you have questions, please continue to put them in the chat because we do have a few more questions. So like I said in the very beginning, we are a movement of educators. A movement absolutely includes you. I think that the best part of my job working for Modern Classrooms now is that I get to kind of be a sponge. I get to learn what members of the network are doing and then share it with other members of the network. I'm just like collecting your great ideas all the time. If you are not currently a member of our Facebook discussion group, this can be a great place for you to go and have questions asked by other, answered by other practicing Modern Classrooms teachers. So there are thousands of Modern Classrooms educators all over the world who are members of this, who are members of this Facebook group. And again, pop in, introduce yourself, ask your questions. It's a really great place to get some answers because we believe teachers learn best from other teachers.
Right.
If
I'm in the group, you can always at me.
That's very kind of you. That is very kind of you. And you are, I'm always impressed every time we get to chat how much I learn from you. We have more resources available for you that I'm going to put in the chat right now. So get ready for this.
For the flood.
There is quite a flood there. So you can find us always, keeping up with our updates on social media is the best place to learn about our recent happenings. We do have a podcast, Modern Classrooms Podcast.Fireside. You can find us on any podcast listening app, and Kristen's going to be joining us on the podcast next week. So you can learn even more about project-based learning in a modern classroom. Our next webinar will actually, this is a call out to all you ELA teachers out there. We get a lot of questions about, writing and reading in a modern classroom. What does this look like? So we're going to be talking about that next month. Mark your calendars, Thursday, April 29th. If you are interested in pursuing a school or district partnership, you can fill out that form in the chat. And then if you would like to become a distinguished modern classroom educator like Kristen, if you want to show off some of the great work you're doing in your classroom around blended, self-paced, mastery-based instruction, we'd receive the certified internal credential that we offer, as well as a really great backpack and a few other perks, including lifetime subscriptions to Edpuzzle, Explain Everything, and Screencast-O-Matic. You can check that out at that last link, Distinguished Modern Classroom Educator application. Those are offered on a rolling basis. We approve those on a rolling basis, and they are due at the end of each month. And then you hear back by the end of the next month. So there are a few more questions.
Oh, good.
One come through. If we are starting from scratch, trying to build a team, implementing project-based learning, is your program, or do you recommend starting with PBL Works or John Spencer? So someone who's brand new to project-based learning, what would be project-based learning resources that you would steer them to?
Well, PBL Works is who I did my training through. Back in the day, I did PBLU and I was trained as a teacher and an author with them. And I've just been really impressed with what they put out in general. So if you are in a brand new school and you're all trying to get that figured out, I would start with them. They also have opportunities where they'll come to you and do PBL 101 with your whole group. And that would be the best way to get like a whole school involved.
Great. And then for Modern Classrooms, of course, we are always here. You can learn more about us at modernclassrooms.org. And our instructional model of blended self-paced mastery-based learners. Educators are using it in their project-based learning units, and they're using it in more, non-project-based learning units. So our expertise is empowering educators and equipping them with research-based strategies to create their own instructional videos, leveraging that technology to create a self-paced blend or self-paced mastery-based classroom. So you can learn more at our free course at learn.modernclassrooms.org, putting that in the chat now, as well as any of the resources that I passed along previously. So we will hang back. It's I don't know, it's a nice night in Washington, D.C. Is it a nice night in Michigan?
It's a pretty nice night, but I hear rain's coming.
Okay. Well, maybe some people can enjoy some weather, get out there on this spring evening, but Kristen and I will hang back if you have any other questions. As a reminder, you will be receiving this webinar, both the slide deck and the recording in your inbox tomorrow. You can always go to our website at modernclassrooms.org/webinars to find anything that you missed and to sign up for the next one on April 29th for our ELA teachers out there. So thank you for joining us, but please hang back if you have more questions. We're here. All right. Great. We've got a few more questions coming in.
Awesome.
Okay, this is a great one. And this is Sherry's question is, do you still do mastery checks throughout? And are students developing pieces of the final product as their mastery checks?
Oh, yes. Okay. So we definitely do mastery checks throughout. Every time they go through one of those lessons in there, they're doing a mastery check on that particular skill. And then those milestone markers, so those bigger formative assessment pieces, it might not be in their exact final product, but that is a building block to getting to that final product, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love how you have the mastery check kind of coming from both
Mm-hmm.
on the end of the lesson side as well as that milestone marker. I really like that. And then David has a question about places to go and get ideas for math specific project-based learning units.
Come to me.
Yeah, go ahead. I don't know. Where do we go?
Well, you can come to me. I am all over Facebook and the socials, so please find me, come to me. I'm happy to share ideas and resources with you. Other ideas, Mathalicious is a great website to just kind of spark it. If you saw, I put that in there. I use the domino effect. They're more like lessons. They have a cool hook for the students and they're always a real world context. They always have like some sort of driving question for it. So they're a great place to get a project idea like spark, but also come at me. I love it.
I just put your Instagram
Okay.
and I put Mathalicious in the chat for anybody who's wondering. And if we are starting from, okay, we've got that one already. We are launching a project-based unit. This is Sherry again, project-based unit on stats with the question, what is my family's impact on the environment?
Yes.
Our idea is that every 3 lessons, they are producing a piece of their project to demonstrate mastery of the topics they just learned. Then at the end, they are developing a presentation of sorts to answer the question using everything they've put together. Is that still in alignment with project-based learning? It seems maybe not all the way there, but many of my team are new to project-based learning.
That sounds like an amazing starting point. I do a very similar project. We call it wasted space in my class, but it's all about your environmental impact with the different packaging aspect is what we look at, but I've also seen it looked at from the stats perspective. And actually, I think that PBL Works it might even be a free project on that exact one. I can try to look that up for us.
Okay. And so I really like this. It sounds like Sherry is every 3 lessons, they're producing a piece of the project to demonstrate mastery. And
Yeah.
that would be a great opportunity to have students get peer feedback, and then teacher feedback, revise, achieve mastery, go on.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if I would limit it at 3. See if you can come up with like a driving question for, anywhere from 2 to 5 lessons. And then at the end of that, have them do that product that they're going to take with them moving forward.
And then while you're looking for that, I am Oh, this is a great question. Claire asks, the sample units on Modern Classroom's website are super helpful. I would also be interested in looking at a sample project-based unit. Is that possible? So I would say we have some on the website currently, particularly that are math, that are sort of like educators who were, getting started with project-based learning. Kristen, is there a place that you'd recommend that, I guess, are there places where people can find your units? I know that we're hoping to collaborate soon and get some of your units actually on the Modern Classroom site. But is there any place that Claire can visit in the meantime to find Modern Classroom's style project-based units?
Um, I think I don't know. I really like the demographer challenge one that you guys have. I actually recommended that to a teacher that I coach, and she is using that and bringing it back to life as we speak.
I'm,
So yeah, so for what's in there right now, that would be a great one to take a look at.
yeah, I'm gonna put that one in the chat, and then if when I can find it here, that might take me a little while. But I like that one. And I think that, at the Modern Classrooms Project, we like teachers are experts, teachers are not volunteers. And if anyone, if you have a unit that you'd like to share with our audience, if you are implementing Modern Classrooms, please let us know. You can email us at info@modernclassrooms .org, and we do compensate educators for their work, and that's just a nice opportunity for you to share exciting things you're doing in your classrooms, any example units that you'd like to share with a larger audience. It can really give teachers an idea of what this looks like for mastery, and mastery-based self-paced blended learning. And I'm going to keep looking for that specific unit here in a second.
I'm sure I have it bookmarked.
Okay, you want to pull that up, that might be great.
Yeah, but I see a question here in the regular chat also about Robert Kaplinsky and problem-based lessons. I love problem-based lessons, you guys. So here's what is really important if you are considering project-based learning in math. Are you ready? Not every standard is going to work with project-based learning. It's not. Problem-based learning is an excellent tool to get at some of those nuances of algebra in particular that you can't really teach well through project-based learning. So yes, all about the problem-based lessons. Those are definitely something you can either incorporate into a project. Sometimes they work really well in there, but you can also do them as one-off lessons and they're still awesome.
Oh, Caesar, we're sorry, it's snowing there.
Oh no.
Yeah. He's not having good weather tonight. Claire, yeah, if you want to, Claire, if Kristen, if you want to grab that unit, if you have a bookmark, it'll probably be faster. Just watching to see if any other questions come in. But again, thank you for joining us tonight. If you don't have any questions, we'll be here at info@modernclassrooms.org if one comes to you later. And again, we're just happy. Kristen, are you on Twitter?
I am. It's also at More Than Just X.
Perfect. Thank you. And then, yep, thanks for grabbing that unit there. I like this one.
Yeah, it's good. I know. I had to tell Rob that I passed it on. He felt good about that.
This is one by our co-founder, Rob Barnett of Modern Classrooms. We'll hang back a few more minutes, but thank you for joining us tonight.
Yes, thank you all.